Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. As always, I will be very happy and excited to be your host. This is going to be a very different podcast than we've done before, a lot more personal. And I'm excited to do this podcast. I'm a little trepidatious to do this podcast. But at the end of the day, I am grateful for the opportunity to be doing this podcast. And I think that'll become much more clear as we go through this. He Changed It wanted to do an episode of heCast to do with Childhood Cancer Awareness Day, which is February 15th. And we wanted to do that because there's a lot of guys out there who have family members, have kids, grandkids, who have gotten sick. And this is one of the struggles that men go through many times, is just living in the times that we live in, and dealing with some of the struggles that life can bring. So we knew we were going to do this show. And there is a lot of people that are in our circle who have either stepped forward and volunteered or been willing to be part of this particular show. But at the end of the day, our family, and I've talked a lot about how I've got the easy part of this job. I get to host the podcast while my wife's the CEO and does all the heavy lifting for He Changed It. It's kind of the best deal ever. Well, our family actually had a real trial, and it was about a year ago. And so today, my guest, who, at the end of the day, we talk about the introductions that we do for these guests and things, and people are always like, wow, that's an amazing introduction. This is actually one of my favorite people in the whole world, from my heart, from everything. It's my stepson, Candy's son, Nico, and an amazing man that I've known for years and years and years. And he and his wife brought in 2.5 years ago the light of my life into this world, which is my granddaughter, which is Nico's daughter, Alara. And this time last year, we went through some real trial, a health trial for Alara. We found out on Christmas Eve of 2019 that Alara had a tumor the size of my fist behind her tailbone. And so, as you can imagine, this was a crazy, crazy thing for our family to go through. And Nico has graciously been willing to step out of his comfort zone and come here and talk a little bit about what it was like to have this epic event happen in his life and in our family's life. And Nico, thank you. Thank you so much for being willing to be vulnerable and to do this. I know this is not your default position.
No, not at all. But I am. I'm grateful to be here and to share our story. And yeah.
You're a man of few words. If you can say it in the one thing I love about you, many things I love about you, but one of the things I love about you is the exact opposite of me. I don't have very good economy of words. If I can take a sentence and stretch it out into another 30, 40 words in there, I do that. You're the exact opposite. Yeah. You can actually get your point across in a very few words.
Yes.
So I know how out of your comfort zone you are doing this right now.
Definitely.
And I want to thank you. And then the subject matter on top of that, never mind. But it's the subject matter that's so important, and that's why you're willing to step out of your comfort zone to do this. Talk about what it's like. So you're a dad of a 2.5-year-old, almost 3-year-old now. She's your first. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we're in the year 2021. So in 2018, you became a dad for the first time. How'd that feel?
It's every emotion you can possibly think of. You are hit with surprise, then joy, then a little bit of fear because there's so much uncertainty, and then back to joy because then you start thinking ahead, future-wise, what's it going to be? And then, who am I going to be? How am I going to be a dad? And, you ask yourself a lot of questions. But I think for the most part, I knew I was going to have kids. I just didn't know when. I thought it was going to be a little bit later on in life.
Right.
you know, because everybody says I'm going to be a little bit more firmly established, whether it be career, finances.
Right.
You know, we didn't own a home at the time.
Yep.
All sorts of things. So you think the planning is going to be there, and then you're like, okay, I'm ready to have kids. And
Right.
Never happens.
Would
right?
that ever, does that happen to anybody? Like, is anybody like, yes, I am ready now? Or is that just one thing that we kind of fall back on when we're saying, oh yeah, no, not now. And it's a good kind of placeholder to procrastinate.
Exactly. I think I'd like to meet the person that actually had it 100% planned out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody you've ever talked to, they say that it never works that way. Right. And life works out how it's supposed to. So yeah, two and a half years ago in 2018. So I was 28 years old.
Yep.
You know, found out we were going to have a baby. So yeah, and it's been an absolute joy. I mean, yes, the fears and the uncertainties are there, but they're much more easily overcome than I thought it was going to be. So a lot of the hype is usually just in your head. And I mean, being a dad is probably the best thing that's ever happened to me and changed me for the best.
How's it changed you?
You become, first and foremost, you become a lot less selfish. So the selfless part of you just takes over.
But you weren't a selfish guy before, though. Like how do you, like, the perception of yourself is that you're less selfish
so.
now?
I guess so. Like, I mean, from the outside, maybe it seems like that, but I mean, all my plans, like I said, the life goals I had, everything kind of centered around, you know, when you do your New Year's resolutions or whatever they may be, you go, okay, well, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to accomplish. These are the goals and dreams I have,
right?
You know, to design your life, whatever, right? And maybe for some people that does include kids. And like I said, for myself, I had a couple more things that I thought I wanted to check off that were important at the time. But then you have a kid, again, you still think, okay, well, I need to get some of these things in place, but a lot of the other stuff, again, just doesn't matter. And you're like, that's either trivial, or I can't believe that's what I thought was going to make me happy or make me a better person. Or
so it's a priority shift, really. At the end of the day, you had priorities before that you might have now, looking through that magnifying glass, you'd consider it, maybe if they were self-serving. You know, not so much. It's just this new creature shows up and suddenly your priorities just completely change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way of putting it. It's not saying that stuff won't happen on in my life. It might just happen a little bit later, but now taking care of a little one and things, just certain things became more important. Right. So. And
did you want a boy or a girl? Was that ever part of the conversation at all, or was it just as long as we got fingers and toes, we're happy?
Thinking back on it, I definitely thought I wanted a boy first, but not for probably the conventional reasons of, you know, father and son and what I get to teach him or anything like that. I thought I wanted, if I was going to have two kids, I wanted a boy first because I thought it was going to be easier. You know, there's that misconception the boys are you know, they're a little tougher or something. Gotcha. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to be as gentle.
Yeah.
So you know, I thought, okay, I'll have that. So, you know, kind of trial and error.
Sure.
So we can drop this one a couple times, and then when we have the baby girl, you know, we'll know what to do.
Right.
So I thought in that sense that maybe that's why I would want a boy first. Also, then to have somebody who would be like a protector for their younger sibling. Initially, that's what I thought. Yeah. I'm glad that again, life had a different plan for me and that I was proven wrong, because again, there's the misconception that you got to be gentle with your daughter. And my little girl right out of the gate, just, you know, from day one, from birth, had her on my chest and she lifts her head like brand new. And so I'm like, the strength, right, is there 100%. And you know, she's dictated who she's going to be and what she wants to do in life already. Right. So, you know, and part of it is just kind of, okay, you know, let them take the reins a little bit in some aspects, guide them, steer them. But so, yeah, I think also having a girl first, and one of the ways it changed me is, patience and stuff too. And then also kind of learning, hey, I have no idea what it's like to be a young female or anything of the sorts. You know, I look to my wife for a lot of those. Okay, what do we do here? You know, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, the learning curve is really quick. And I mean, I'm happy to say she's a little daddy's girl anyway. So the bond that her and I have built already in the 2.5 years is exceptional in my books.
To say the least, she's changed your life forever.
Oh, yes.
And for the better, obviously.
And for the best. 100%.
Talk about the fear beforehand versus the fear once she's born and you have this new infant. Like you had these perceptions before she was born, the fear of becoming a dad for the first time. And I think that's many guys out there who haven't had a kid yet. Yeah. They talk about that. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. That's a unique kind of fear. Then she's born, that just melts away completely. But now there's new priorities or new fears that show up. And they're very different from each other, obviously. Talk a little bit about that and just how that's changed your mindset and since Alara has entered your life.
The fear, like, and I don't know if it's even so much of being afraid, more so is just uncertainty as to you don't know what's coming up next.
Right.
Especially if, like, I have that personality, I love to plan things out.
Okay.
If it's a road trip, if it's anything to like work, my daily life, I'm a planner. Right. I hate when I'm, 5 minutes late because it's like, we could have planned this a lot better.
Okay.
So when you have something, when you have a child, that part just goes right out the window. So already in my mindset and my character, it was a bit of a stressor.
Right.
And then I think a lot of the fears that come up and arise for parents is, am I good enough? Right.
Okay.
You think about your own childhood. You think about, kind of the things you had to endure.
Yep.
Automatically you go, I hope they never have to go through some of that. However, then it's like, those things I did go through shaped the character and the person that I am today. So they have to go through those things, life and whatnot. But there's this part where you want to protect them.
Right.
Am I strong enough? Am I big enough to protect them from these things so that they have the best quality of life that they can possibly have? And so automatically I think, it wasn't whether I was going to be a good dad or not. It was just, am I ready to take on the world in a different aspect than what I was planning on having to do at this stage in my life? I didn't think I was too young, but I didn't think I was too old either. Like I said, there was
28,
other,
absolutely.
other plans. Definitely some, people have their kids a lot sooner than that. Sometimes that uncertainty and fear creeps up even to this day, but it's definitely got a lot easier in time because, especially in what we're going to talk about later on, kind of the trials which we had to go through.
Yeah.
You kind of take those speed bumps, those life lessons that come, and you take them with a lot more grace, again, some patience, especially with yourself. Just I'm doing the best that I possibly can, right? You
cut yourself some slack now.
Yeah.
So it's that the fear that you're talking about is the idea that I'm not good enough. And it's almost like an imposter syndrome thing. You want to make sure that they don't go through some of the things maybe you went through, and that at the same time you learn life lessons that, well, no, that's also just life. They're becoming who they are, and it's not so bad if they go through some of the things that you went through.
Well, 100%, because then you're like, how? There's no application really that you have to go through or any
no process.
100% to say, okay, you're fit to be this type of person now. It happens, and it happens without warning, and you're like, am I even grown up for myself to do these things on a day-to-day life for me, right? Again, I feel like the character that I am, I've had enough head on my shoulders, so to speak, to take care of those things. So, kind of going into this, again, with a very mature mindset.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of guys that, maybe don't or whatnot. So as soon as I was like, hey, you're going to be a dad, this is your job, I took it very seriously.
Yeah.
So again, the pressures of, hey, you need to rise up to the occasion, and this is what you're going to have to do. Especially you will be tested, the late nights and just the different routines that you have to go through. But again, like you said, cut yourself a little bit of slack. Know that nobody's perfect. Everybody's gone through it. Well, most people have gone through it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And just do the best you can. So,
I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know if you'll be able to answer it right now. What's the biggest surprise? Is that I'm putting you on the spot asking you that, but
the biggest surprise with having a child?
Yeah. Since Alara has been born, what's the biggest surprise for you?
The first thing that comes to my mind is how much fun it is. And it's fun just about every day. There are times, and I remember another dad one time saying to me, this was before I had Alara, and he's like, I get home And if you had a really big day at work or what have someone's on your plate and you're just like, today I didn't want a dad, or today I just didn't want a parent, whatever, right? Sometimes there's those days that when you're a single person or you're just looking after yourself and your spouse, you can just kind of coast and ride. When you have a kid, it's nonstop.
Right.
You're on.
It's relentless.
100%.
Yep.
Right. So the perception is that this is hard, this is tough. And there are those times, but nobody tells you, unless they truly love it, they don't tell you that there are really good times, that there are, that this is all worth it right from the get-go, that you are going to have fun, that you're not losing a part of yourself. Because I know there's a big part of that. It's like, as soon as I have a kid, I'm no longer me.
Right.
I don't know if it happens with men as much, or maybe it does and we just don't talk about it.
Right.
Because there's a few things that I learned that nobody does prepare you for. And, maybe that's something for another episode. But,
sure.
I know with women, they talk about postpartum. They talk about your identity because it really changes for them as well. So again, I don't know to a severity degree if that changes for males, but it definitely is there.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely have a lot more fun than I do stress.
It's cool that you said that. I go back to a David Letterman quote. David Letterman was always terrified to have kids, and then he ended up having a son in his 50s. His late 50s, I believe his son was born. And he talked about the fear, and he goes, if somebody would have told me how funny, babies are hilarious. If somebody would have told me how funny they were, I wouldn't have been nearly as afraid. Yeah. And you have that in spades. You have a daughter who is one of the funniest little creatures I've ever seen in my life.
And at 2.5, and I think that's one of the things that makes it so fun in having a child is seeing their personalities come through. What are they going to be like? Because you ask yourself all these questions. What are they going to be into? What do they love? Who do they take after? And so we always play this game in our house. It's like, oh, that, I'll look at mom and be like, that attitude's definitely you. Or Alara will do something. She goes, okay, that's definitely you. Right. And so that, again, adds to the hilarity. And again, seeing her at 2.5 have such a humor about her. She knows she's funny.
She does know she's funny.
Like, she'll do something.
Absolutely.
You've seen it where she'll get, and maybe she wasn't intentional at that moment when she did it, but then you get a reaction. She goes,
yeah.
I'm like, I don't, maybe every kid does this. I have no idea to back it, but I'm in awe of my child saying, oh, wow, you made that connection, and saying like, this is funny. I got this reaction. I'm going to do it again.
Yeah. She's got a material now.
She's choosy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like she goes, it doesn't happen every time, she'll run that material for a little bit and then not take a break.
Right.
And then it just happens randomly in some other time. And you're like, you totally know what you're doing.
Yep.
That's totally funny.
Yep.
Right. So,
and she does. She has this plethora of stand-up material that's back there that she'll just break out if she wants to make somebody laugh. And I love that about her too. She's one of the funniest things in the world. So let's go into your 2020 a little bit. Let's talk about this. And it's funny when people talk about 2020. And there's a lot of people who talk about it. They talk about, the coronavirus and the pandemic that's hit and all this. And a lot of people saying, oh, 2020 was one of the worst years I've ever had and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people who are saying that. You have a very different definition of your version of 2020. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that. At December of 2019, Alara at that point is 18 months-ish, right? Pretty close to 18 months. What happened? And let's just go into it a little bit.
Yeah, as the, I guess, chronological order of how it played out. So December 22nd, I remember it was the day after my staff Christmas party.
Yep.
So she was staying with you guys, staying at the grandparents' house.
Yep.
And we were all we had a family event planned for that evening, right? I think we were going to go see some light up or whatnot. And I remember arriving here around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, dressed up, ready to go. And we stepped in and Laura was crying. She wasn't having a good time, which wasn't something that we weren't, I want to say, not used to, because at 18 months, babies cry, sure. Constipation because of teething and all sorts of things. It happens, right? And that was something that we were contending with so long, was her inability to, go to the bathroom, facilitate properly, right? And again, everybody tells you, oh, no, that's the child. Like, my child hadn't gone to the bathroom for 7 days, and this is the norm. This is what happens. So you kind of just shrug it off and you go, okay, like that is what it is, right? And I remember walking upstairs so that we can console her and, see, so she could see her parents, and usually that would help, and it didn't. And I remember her seeing just this it was a different cry, a painful cry. The look and expression on her face is still there. And then I remember holding her, and so she was just got out of a bath, right? Hot, warm water, be soothing. And I remember mom saying, hey, you know, this is something I saw today that is just concerning me. Have you guys noticed this before? Mm-hmm. And looking down and seeing, and she had probably about the size at that point of a golf ball on her tailbone, like perfectly on her tailbone. And it was all discolored purple, and going, no, I've never seen that. Like literally the day before I dropped her off, I had never seen anything like that. And your first reaction is, did you fall? Kids fall, right? She's newly walking, blah, 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 running, playing. And nope, she didn't fall. I've been monitoring her all day. She didn't have an accident, nothing, hasn't complained about it. Well, that's weird. Okay. That's, and I really thank my wife and my mom for this, to have the women's intuition, right? As they call it, and to trust that intuition, because at that moment we said, you know what? We don't feel comfortable continuing on with our plans. Let's go to the emergency room. Something's going on here that just doesn't feel right as a mother and as a grandmother, and you know, mom having 2 kids of her own. Because I probably would have, I mean, in truthfulness, would have been like, okay, you know,
let's leave it a day and see what happens.
Well, exactly. I do the same thing for myself. Why bother? You know, you just walk it off. We'll see how it goes, and if it persists, then we'll take care of it, right? And again, I'm thankful, and life lesson learned, and it's going, okay, you know, when these feelings or something just doesn't sit right, then take care of it. And so we went to the emergency room. Again, it's probably around 6:30 at night at this point, and waited a long time. Finally, they saw us, and at that moment, you're kind of thinking, okay, it's okay. You know, this is everyone. Actually, I was gonna say a couple doctors, because we saw about 3 that evening, which then also causes worry. Why are we seeing 3 different doctors?
Right.
They're like, oh, maybe she's just a little backed up.
And they did an ultrasound at that point, right? That night?
Not just yet.
Okay.
Right. So have you seen, you know, I remember initial doctor came and he looked at her and he kind of, you know, did his quick assessment, called somebody else in. And it wasn't until I think by the 3rd doctor that they brought in the whatever portable ultrasound machine that they have.
Right.
Took a look, and he's like, I can't really get anything conclusive. And of course it's at nighttime, so we can't send you for, you know, better imaging.
Right.
And then, of course, I'm sure they saw something. They just don't want to let you know that at that point. You know, looking back in hindsight, you're like, okay, you know, if they tell you the excuse, oh, we can't really get the proper image here, so, you know, we're going to have you come back. And at that point, they did bring in a pediatrician. They called him in. He came, he saw us, he did I would say a little bit more of a thorough assessment, got her to walk around. And Alara had this thing where she would always walk on her tippy toes. Yeah. Right? And once again, every doctor or parent, or that's normal. Kids do that. They have fun. They walk on their tippy toes, and well, it's not. They can do it for a minute, but it's like constant. This is how she was walking, right? So he said, you know,
she'd run like that. She'd run on her tiptoes.
Yeah, 100%. Run, do everything.
And everyone would think it's the most adorable thing in the whole world.
Exactly. You're playing or whatever, your imagination. So that's kind of what you chalk it up to. And at that moment, he says, you know, this kind of concerns me. He goes, I can tell that, he goes, you know, when I touch her, she's not in immediate pain, but there's discomfort here. And he goes, I'll be straight, and I'm concerned. So I need you to come back. And so this was then December 23rd in the morning. We came back for our ultrasound. Her mom and I got to go into the ultrasound room with her. They do their assessment. At that point, same thing. The tech is there doing his thing, and then he calls in another doctor as for, you know, hey, I'm not sure if I'm getting this right, he says. Right. You know, and meanwhile, we're staring at the thing going like, is that something? Am I looking at, you know?
What do I see on
I don't know how to read.
Exactly.
The last ultrasound I saw was when she's a little peanut. Yeah. You know.
And you can't discern anything.
No, you don't know how to read those. So you're kind of like, you know, but again, it doesn't feel right. You know, okay, now we're getting other expertise brought in here. So that all happens. And then for whatever reason, same thing, we saw our pediatrician. He says, I just didn't get the images that I wanted. It's kind of inconclusive. I want to run an MRI. So now we're escalating, you know, kind of our testing, and just to kind of nail down what is going on here, right? Yes. So then it was December
That was the 24th, the
22nd, 23rd. So
Or
23rd.
okay, yeah.
Oh, December 23rd now is because we went back to back almost 3 days to the hospital, right? So December 23rd is when we came back, first thing in the morning for an MRI, which again, an 18-month-old doesn't know why they're there, doesn't know why they can't have any food. So that was in itself a massive trial. Because,
and Candy and I were there for that one. That was
yeah.
And that's the other thing. Like, okay, we're in Canada, universal healthcare, which is great. And thankful for that.
100%.
But one of the things about universal healthcare, one of the knocks, is that sometimes things like MRIs and things like that can sometimes be, you get it next week, a month from now, whatever, where you're on the list. That was where, from the grandfather perspective, I was kind of where you were too. It's like, whatever, it'll get dealt with, whatever. But after that, when I found out where they said, no, actually, on the 23rd of December, we've got room for an MRI tomorrow. Come on down for an MRI tomorrow. I'll be here first thing.
First thing in the morning.
And it's like, at that point there, you're like, okay, something ain't right.
Right before Christmas.
Right before, exactly.
Right before the holidays.
Christmas.
People are already taking their time off and all that stuff. So
but we got an MRI spot for you right now. It's like, okay.
And so that plays on your mind. But, I want to say sometimes through conditioning, we're taught to be positive, to always think the best, to always kind of again kind of suppress. So there will be some details as we kind of go on that I don't remember because of it's almost a protection mode. So I do remember that, but I also remember kind of feeling like, okay, we're just going through the motions, so let's just get this taken care of, we'll find out everything's okay and move on, right? So I didn't put the puzzle piece together that we're having an MRI right before the holidays. This is unusual. Yes, I've had friends who needed MRIs and they wait years, 1, 2, 3 years, unless they're willing to go pay privately. Right. So, I chalked it up. Okay. She's a child, she's
Absolutely.
a child.
Yep.
They care. We're going to get this done, whatever. Right. So so December 23rd, first thing in the morning, we got that taken care of. Then I remember coming, I think we waited probably about a couple hours. I think it was after that point.
It's funny how things.
It felt like maybe a few hours.
That was traumatic for all of us because we couldn't be in the MRI room, crying, baby, the thing that you love more than anything.
The first time she was taken away from us.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You're not there. Reassured. Okay, she's going to be in good hands. I mean, leading up to that point, again, she can't have anything in her system. So we're like 9 o'clock in the morning. The poor kid just wants to eat.
Yeah.
Right. And you try to explain to a 2-year-old why you can't.
And they're knocking her out to do an MRI. Like it's crazy.
Yeah,
and it was a few hours. It was definitely a few hours. Right. It was by the time you guys got to go in before we did, obviously. And then we went up the elevator and all that, and the recovery room. Yeah. I'm thinking at that time it was like 1:30 in the afternoon, kind of a thing. We got there, and then in that waiting room, you're in more the pediatrician side of the hospital where it's a little bit painted nicer and whatnot. But in that room, that's when it happened.
Well, and then the first, I guess, clue is we went from recovery room, which makes sense, coming out of anesthesia, they monitor her and okay, cool, great. And I got, same thing. I got to sit in the bed, I got to hold her, and they're like, okay, we're going to move you over to, the pediatrics side. And, your pediatrician will come and talk to you then. And when we got there, I remember kind of getting settled in. It was probably about 10, 15 minutes later, a nurse comes in and she goes, okay, I'm just going to do your paperwork to admit you. And everybody was like, what do you mean admit you? And she goes, well, I don't know. Nobody's come and talked to me. And she goes, I was just told to come and do this. We're like, well, nobody's come and talked to us about staying here. So what's happening? And so she put the paperwork on hold at that point. And then eventually, which again felt a lot longer than it probably was. Then the pediatrician comes in with basically a report of what the MRI said. And he says, there's no easy way to say this, but she has a fairly large tumor in her pelvis. And at that moment, time stops.
Yes.
Right. And the shock, more of a shock than hearing you're going to have a kid, that you're going to be a father, that your life's about to change. That moment there, and I probably will get emotional about it because the fears that I had that you're not strong enough to save her or protect her from these things came back in 18 months that I hadn't thought about because, we had my wife and I got married in 2018. We had a beautiful wedding out on the island, and then we flew out to Hawaii, and our baby celebrated her first birthday in Maui. It took me 18 years to get to Maui, but my kid celebrates her first birthday
Traveled
there.
like a champ.
traveled like a champ on the flight, didn't cry once. No. We had terrible flights as far as like red eyes and stuff like that. And so we're coming off of this, I want to say, kind of like this big win as a family, and feeling so good. And then smack, again, nothing that you could ever prepare for in saying that your kid is sick or that this is happening, right? But again, just instantly, I remember being flooded, going like, how? And it wasn't even a why. It was like, no, why is this happening? One of those like, you're kind of smart enough to know that cancer and tumors and things, they just happen. There's no explanation, right? Everyone says, oh, don't eat this or don't do this. This will cause, right? But at an 18-month-year-old, I didn't really ask why. I just like how? Yeah. How come? I don't remember having a pity party so much, as to like why her and, how come this has to happen. But I just remember being completely knocked off my feet for that. And then, from the process after that is basically, and I'm very, very thankful for this doctor, and what he did for us. I wish I could remember his name. Yeah. Is he completely took his ego out of it. Yeah. He took us into another room, just the mom and I and my wife, and social worker, I think, came in and said, okay, he goes, I don't want to take care of this here. He goes, I'm going to send you to BC Children's. And he told us the reason why he had taken a little bit longer in coming to talk to us was that he already set things in motion with an oncologist who saw the scans of the MRI and said, yes, bring her here. Yeah. And so I'm very thankful for that, we didn't, because as the journey continues, it was such a blessing, and I'm so grateful for how they took care of her. Mm-hmm. But I do remember that one moment, and I'm very thankful for that doctor, because I don't think every doctor would be like that. I think they go, okay, I've done so many years of schooling, I've got so many years under my belt. Kelowna has a great teaching hospital and all sorts of things, even as far as our cancer ward and everything goes. But he said, no, for her, I want her to go to BC Children's. And and the rest of the night was pretty much spent planning and figuring out, okay, well, how are we going to get to Vancouver? And of course, being the 24th and 25th, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, he said, well, you're not going to be able to do anything at this point. They're not even going to be able to see you down there. So, try to spend the holidays the best you can with your family. And then on the 26th, get in your car, get on a flight, and go.
So, and just to give a little perspective, so that's the Children's Hospital is about 300-400 miles away from where you live. So it's it's in another city, biggest city in Western Canada. You're going to be going there, but thank goodness you didn't have to spend that next few nights in the hospital. They gave a LAR back to you, and then on the 27th, you're in Vancouver. 5 days after the original lump was found, suddenly you're in Vancouver. This was where, for me, I didn't really know what a social worker was, and the fact that they have this mechanism to set all of this stuff up. So basically, you and your wife and your daughter just had to show up, and all this stuff was set up by other people, less compromised people. I didn't know that framework existed. I've never had somebody in my family that's that close that this has ever happened to. Oh, 100%, and at that point you become grateful for all the little things in the background that get kind of taken care of that you just wouldn't have had. You were compromised, right? Yeah. Were you so on the 27th you arrive in Vancouver. Were you still in shock at that point? Like, was the fear tangible, or were you just numb at that point?
Numb is probably the best way to describe it. If you have to attach a word to it, it's later on after all this is finished. I find out it's the human mind disassociates when you're in survival mode. Right. But instinctually, again, as a parent, you just the switch flips. And you go, this is what I have to do. And really, we just did our best to take it one step at a time. So like you were saying, this mechanism of people taking care of things, they said, well, this is what you got to do next. This is what you got to go pick up. This is where you got to go. This is who you got to talk to. And you go, okay. You don't really think about it much more than that. You just go, okay, step one.
You follow the steps.
Yeah. Step two, step three, and so forth until you get to some sort of conclusion, right? which as we go and we progress, we find out that what we thought would be a conclusion leads on to another chapter.
Right.
And then that conclusion to another chapter. So you're, once again, you think you're going to be prepared. You think you can take it all on, and I'm, this is what I do, but you're never fully prepared.
If I'm hearing you right, and I mean, there are going to be men who are listening to this that have people in their lives that either are or have been or will be sick at some point. Like, this is why we're doing this. If I'm hearing you right, a piece of advice for somebody who might be in the middle of this kind of a shitstorm sort of a thing is just take each moment as it comes. Don't think beyond. Don't plan for whatever, because sometimes just the moment, just get through that moment, get through the next moment, get through the next moment. Yeah. Because making plans like that just don't seem, they're fruitless, and they'll be overwhelming and all of that. And you got to just be in the moment.
Well, and I think especially for 2020, and where people have learned to what it's like to live kind of in crisis.
Right.
This has been a very unique year for that.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do, obviously people say panic, right? Okay, fine, get over that initial shock, have that, but then same thing, just try to go almost on autopilot, listen to what your professionals are saying, so whether if it's your doctor, your social worker, or whoever, and then just do your best to put the next foot forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the 27th, you're down there. So let's fast forward to like we talked about 2020. Okay. So let's talk about New Year's 2019.
Yeah. Well, New Year's
Eve.
She was in recovery on the 8th floor of the Children's Hospital, and she just got out of like a 7.5-hour surgery to remove that tumor.
And they went in the front and the back.
Yes, exactly.
They went in both sides to get rid of a tumor that's about the size of my fist.
Well, and that's where the shock was when we were having the consultation with the surgeon, was that when you look at her tailbone, and like I said, it was a golf ball size, right? As, any kind of bruise or something would be, especially where your tailbone, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we asked, well, maybe how large do you think it is? And she says, about the size of a navel orange.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my 18-month-old child going, where?
How do you fit? Yeah.
Where do you put this?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And it's like, how? How is that possible? So looking back, it made so much more sense as to, again, the bathroom issues.
Yep.
She couldn't sit in her car seat for more than like 5 minutes at best. We would go from, like, we live maybe 7 minutes away from our mall.
Yep.
So from home to mall, she couldn't even make it before she started crying.
Yeah.
And we just thought, well, again, people tell us, oh, kids hate car seats, kids hate strollers. And I'm like, really? Like, this is, what's happening? And even if we were going to the park, somewhere she loved to go, and she's sitting in her stroller, she's screaming. And, and then that's frustrating because you don't have an answer.
Right.
Now looking back, a year later, going like, oh my, this is what she was contending with.
And she didn't cry that much. Like, it's not like, it's like she wasn't a crying baby very much. No. Yeah, she hated her stroller because she wanted to get out and play and hug and all that kind of stuff. And that's what it seemed like.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you got parents there. Yeah. Trust that intuition. Yeah. Because, I mean, that's what you guys ended up doing, is you ended up trusting that intuition and going, no, this is something beyond that.
Again, like, it just didn't add up. Or so, we went through it as best we could, and we're trying, and the same thing, the sleep, everything it affected. But again, you're going, okay, well, she's a toddler. Right. Or no, she's an infant at this point, right? And people just say, oh, that's just something that you got to go through. She's a colicky baby, this, that, and the other. And we're like, okay, I guess so. And then, now looking back, we're like, and she has no way of communicating except for saying, hey, this hurts and I'm upset, and crying about it, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that makes you feel a little bit worse afterwards, too, because you're like, oh, man, I see this going, hindsight as to what you were having to contend with, right? So, we had that consultation with the surgeon, and she says, this is my plan of attack, and this is what we got to do. And
she was a badass.
Oh, she was amazing.
Yeah,
Dr. Buttersworth.
She was absolutely a badass. Yeah, she was amazing. She was awesome.
And what was, the whole step of the way, we had amazing doctors and nurses. Yeah. And you're not really kind of thinking, what's your credentials or expertise here, because you're just like, hey, just look after my kid. But when we, kind of heard more about them or looked them up, or so to speak, it's like, oh yeah, she was like, Canada renowned and had so many awards, and as a surgeon and
a teacher, and
100%, she was like the top of her field. So we kind of found that out pre-surgery, which then alleviated some of that, stress, and going, okay, she's in good hands.
Yeah.
Because again, as a parent, no matter what it is, you just want your kid to have the best and to be looked after. And of course, Children's Hospital, this is all they do, and take care of, right? So, but it doesn't matter, what's going on. It's like, it's your kid, right? So
you didn't leave the hospital when Alara was admitted.
No, not yet. I don't think any of us did.
Yeah.
Especially that day. We were.
You slept with her every night though, and whatnot, like you.
Post surgery. 100%. There was no way I could leave it.
Was that day that the 31st of December 2019? That was her surgery day. Was that the longest day of your life? It was the longest day of my life. That's the reason why I'm asking you that.
This is where it's a part of, like, I remember. I can tell you cognitively that it was 7.5 hours. Do I remember it to this day as to what it was or what it felt like? No, because it was something that, again, my body just went numb. It was, wow. I remember trying to think or do, I think I had my laptop with me, and just tried to distract of anything that was going on. That day, so I think she went in somewhere around like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. They obviously sedate her, and so,
which was hilarious, by the way.
That part was.
Remember the video where we have of her like being
trying
all
to find the silver lining
high
of things, as a sedated baby. You think she was funny then?
She walking around with the dope look on her face.
Alaria had never had a haircut, right? So she had
crazy
almost
hair.
2 years worth of growth, and it was bedhead. So she had this wild hair, and she was just talking, baby language away, and kind of a loopy, and she was also smiling, laughing. So that was kind of a nice distraction, is that she was smiling and laughing, right? She doesn't know what's going on. But once it was go time, I remember suiting up, so to speak, and walking her into that room, and same thing. And I think that's when my mind went, sort of, I'm going to protect you now. So it's almost like I shut off.
Right.
I remember holding her there till they put the gas mask on, and you're holding her, you're looking at her, and she's worried, she's scared, she doesn't know, and she's looking at you, and lights out kind of thing, and then they escort you out of the surgery room, right? And then you're just kind of left there to wait. And
there are some dads who are hearing this right now who are like almost like your fear before the kid showed up, where they're like, as you described this, they think about the idea of a mask like that being put on their child, and they're like, I couldn't even bear it. I couldn't go through that. And you're here to say, you can. Oh yeah, you can. It does.
It's not like
you
even have to
are
think
equipped to
about
go
that.
through it.
Yeah.
Like you
just
have
essentially
this.
it's turned on for you. You know what I mean? I didn't have to think about it. I mean, obviously, I love my daughter, wholeheartedly, unconditionally. It didn't matter, right? I would walk through the sun for her. It doesn't make it any less hard to see. Even in checkups now, it's like when MRIs happen and CT scans, it's like, this is hard to watch, but you do it.
Yes.
But I remember walking down that hallway with the nurses, and my wife took a photo of us walking away, and I have our baby on my shoulder, and like I said, I think it was like after that happened, gas mask on, and I walk out of those doors, it was almost like the brain just went lights out.
Right.
I didn't sleep the night before, obviously, and you're just waiting. It's a lot of waiting game, which seems like it would be agonizing, but like I said, it's kind of like something just stops you. And the only part that I think I remember too is like you're waiting to hear an update, and the surgeon, she said, I will call you, or I'll call a nurse, and the nurse will come tell you kind of how things are going. And so
they said about halfway through that would happen.
And I remember we got an update, everything's going well. No complications, and you're like, and that's all you want to hear.
That's
no complications,
absolutely
right. Like you're like, okay, is this going okay? And so that kind of same thing, you kind of you breathe a sigh of relief, and then you're waiting for the next one. That's all it is. It's just waiting for that next update, that next step. That's okay, what's going on? And I believe it went a little, maybe about an hour or an hour and a half past what the
estimation was.
The estimated time, right? So it did take a while, but then same thing. As soon as you're able to kind of hit that recovery room, I mean, it's the best feeling. I get my baby back, and she's sitting there, and I mean, the poor thing.
Puffy.
Well, because she was what they had to do. So they started at the front, And then they basically inverted her with her bottom end up, and kind of like a downward dog position. So she was on her face for like 4 or 5 hours, they said, right, to get that to where basically this tumor was most held. And so, yeah, all the blood and swelling. And so I came out and it's like, not that she was unrecognizable, but it looked like my kid gained like 30 pounds, right? She's just round and everything. And then hooked up to all these tubes and intubated and all this kind of stuff. And you're just, same thing. It's an image you're not prepared for. And you're just, at least the emotion of I'm so thankful she's out and alive is more so than what am I seeing right now?
The fear, the uncomfort of what's in front of you. Yeah.
And they basically woke her up when we're there because they're like, we don't want her to wake up to unfamiliar space and people. So I got to be right there. They woke her up. They check her vitals. I think we were there for about an hour in the recovery room before we went to our own room on the different wards. So
that was a hard day. You know, and maybe for the sake of time, we'll move forward, and I won't talk about some of my commentary from that. But I will say this: you throughout this process, I was gobsmacked a bunch of times as to how you, as a father, went through this with her and how you led your family, and you really did. You had this tone that was just. And I mean, you'd never gone through this before. You were a new dad, you know, 18 months earlier, being freaked out about being a dad, and going through this process, even up to the point of just the surgery alone, seeing the way that you led, and hearing that it was just sort of instinctual is mind-boggling to me. So she is in the recovery room. We have a few days of recovery. The next part of this tale is pathology coming back with analyzing what this thing was. We were hoping that it was a cyst. We were hoping that it was something that was just whatever, but that's not what it was.
No, and if you ask me, actually, that was the part that took the longest because they have to send it away. They have to do their testing. And that part, when you're trying to hear if it's, you know, malignant or benign, that took forever.
Name the tumor Virgil. Your wife named the tumor Virgil.
Yeah, because she didn't like the name. So then, you know, it had...
Let's call it Virgil.
Yeah, exactly. So then we, you know, Virgil's gone. You know, the baby can be much more happier and all that stuff. But basically how the end of the surgery had to go was because the tumor was so large and where it was placed, it was very well fed by an artery. Like this thing was just, I've got a picture of it. It was super healthy, right?
It looked like a human heart.
It really did.
When you looked at the tumor, it looked like a human being's heart.
And so when they cut it out, they had to leave about 2% of it behind because it was just too close to an artery wall that if trying to extract 100% of it would have been way too risky. And so I'm thankful to this day still that the surgeon made that call because, you know, who knows what could have happened if nick an artery and somebody so small, right? So, so yeah, waiting for pathology. I think that took about a week, maybe even close to 2. And I remember basically I didn't really coordinate with work that I was leaving. I just left. You know, you kind of figure out those plans later on. So I remember talking to my boss at BC Children's over the phone saying like, I'm just waiting. And, you know, I'll let you know when I hear that. And that day came, and I remember being pulled into a room with the whole family, and we had our oncologist, our nurse clinician, and I think a couple other residents that were there, and basically talking about how the test came back positive that these were cancerous cells, and how by her other scans, it looks like Laura has, you know, small spots on her lungs. I can't give you the medical name of what the tumor type that she had was. Basically it was called a yolk sac tumor, and it grows in one of 3 spots or all of them, which is in the pelvis by the tailbone, on their lungs, or in the brain. And by their scans they were like, hey, these are really small, but we can't take a chance that this isn't already growing on her lungs. So she still has 2% left in her on her tailbone, and then she's got these spots. It's come back cancerous. Our next step is to do chemotherapy to make sure that we eradicate anything to stop from spreading. Right. So,
and that was the point. They basically said, okay, we're into the first week of a new year. You're going to be here till April.
Yeah, exactly. They said by our oncologist, same thing. Amazing woman. We found out later on, even afterwards, that she was head of oncology.
Yeah.
Again, you just kind of put your trust and your faith in that. And she's like, I think she's going to need minimum 4 rounds, and then we'll see how things look after that.
Right.
So again, kind of hit you with a bit of uncertainty because they can't give you a definitive, oh yeah, 1 or 2 and she's done. No, right? And we kind of told ourselves that story. We're like, okay, maybe she only needs 1 or 2 rounds. And checking by as we progressed through and we got to see kind of her test results and her blood work, you're like, she's doing good. Okay, there's a marker, thankfully, that can be detected through her blood. An AFP marker, right?
Protein marker.
Yeah, protein hormone marker, right? And that was coming down drastically with each round. And so after, I think it was round 2, we're getting really hopeful at this point that we're going, okay, you know what, maybe it's only 2. Mm-hmm. But then, they kind of said, no, we have to go the distance and to make sure. And again, you're like, okay, as hard as it is, because you just kind of want the whole process to be done and over with and kind of stop that, I don't want to say pain, but pretty much pain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For everybody. But yeah, we were there till April, right, middle of April.
And COVID sprung up around you.
Yes. Yes, it sure did. Yeah.
I think it's worth telling the listeners right now, Alara is great.
Yeah.
She's upstairs from this studio right now. She's great.
Yeah.
She's phenomenal.
Everything going on. I mean, she's just an amazing 2-year-old kid, and her hair's pretty much coming back. It's not as long as it was, but she's happy, healthy. She's advancing. Oh yeah. She's doing really good.
Okay, so it's nice to say that, because, and you talk about gratefulness on another level. You guys stayed at Ronald McDonald House. Mm-hmm. And I mean, at the end of the day, you guys saw people who don't get a chance to talk about the ending that you guys have gotten, and you had uncertainty as to what the ending of your story was going to be at that point. Mm-hmm. We talk about learning how to live in the moment as opposed to, the what if scenarios down the line. Talk a little bit about what you've learned through this process, because now we're on the other side of it. You got back here in April, COVID's happening, so you basically were able to take the summer off for the most part, and didn't even start going back to work till September. Yep. You've got a little bit of clarity now, and we keep hitting anniversaries. A year ago today this happened, a year ago today that happened. So you've got some perspective. What are some of the things that you learned from this process?
First and foremost is that you definitely are stronger than you think you are, because as these trials and obstacles, if talking about it and somebody across the table said, this is what you got to do, I'd be like, holy crap, I don't think I can. Or how do you expect me to go through that? Obviously you have no choice. Right. And so you just kind of rise to that occasion. So that was kind of the first thing that I noticed. And, thank you for the compliment saying that, I led my family, and I don't remember having internal dialogue saying like, hey, I got to be strong. I got to do this. And
there's no Batman
no, you don't
monologue inside your head going on.
100%. It's wonderful. Like, we had a great community. I had a great support of people some people I hadn't even really talked to in either a long time, or some people I didn't even know would either message and talk to you and say, hey, you got this. Hey, and give words of encouragement. And it's all fun and well. It's very nice and very touching to get, but sometimes you kind of sit there in the silence of yourself. Like, I wouldn't go to bed till about 3:00 in the morning, just about every night. Yeah. That was just the routine. Alara had nightly checkups every 15, 20 minutes. And I was just always she'd wake up and I was always just wanting to be there. So yeah, every time she was in a round of chemo at the hospital, I was there for a week, right? Until that one time she got a really bad bacteria.
Right. Yes.
Then we had that go through that. And we were there for,
I forgot about that.
10 days, if not a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we constantly had some hurdles. So, I mean, I had my moments. I definitely had a couple breaking points where, you just... It's not that you can't even take anymore. It's just, I think sometimes then it just kind of floods and hits you, and then you're like, holy crap, again, I just got to kind of release it. I dealt with it in the best way that I possibly could. The learning came after, when I got home and I had some downtime, I didn't jump back into work. I had enough through benefits, to the caretaker benefits, to stay at home. And I said, just everything that we went through, being a father, I was just there for survival. I was there for looking after. We had some up moments, I would say, through that 4 months. Like we try to capitalize pre-COVID. Obviously, we try to capitalize on some good times and get her out, because she's still a kid. Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that got her through this and us through this is that, like Mom said, she didn't really have an attachment to the story. It wasn't, she was just a regular kid and saying like, hey, I'm going to get through this. It's us that makes the whole situation a little bit more elevated. Yes. And a little bit, not saying that there isn't a severity to it, but that whether it's going to be, doom and gloom, or we're going to ride this out and we're going to be okay. Right. It's not fooling ourselves and saying, hey, everything is sunshine and roses, because again, there's a seriousness to it. But when we were having our down moments, we weren't talking about that with Lara. That was one thing I noticed with other parents, and not to call parents out, but sometimes we get into those moments because we just don't know how to handle our own stresses. And so they would be like, oh, okay, we have to go through this. And then we talk about it in front of their kids. That might be even just a daily life thing that, it's like, not that you have to spare them. There's realities. Yeah. But in knowing how we got through this, again, it was a lot had to be driven by mindset. So I learned that there, but coming back, having to be able to kind of sit with it, I learned a lot about myself and, again, the mental health aspects of this. I didn't take care of myself at all for pretty much a whole year. And even beyond this, when I went back to work, I have a very physical job, but I basically hid behind every kind of, feel good thing, because that's what we do as humans. That is natural, is to run away from pain, gravitate towards pleasure. Right. And I went through something really heavy. I went through something really big. I deserve this extra drink or this food, and you just kind of hide.
Gotcha.
Right. So the biggest thing that I learned, if you ask me today, now that it's been almost a year, is I neglected myself, which, again, I'm thankful for my family to be there and kind of put up with some of that stuff that, I was going through, and we were all going through it. But, I definitely could have been a bit stronger, a bit better. And then afterwards, again, just denying, just totally disassociating. Like, again, I still can't believe we did this.
It's one of those. Yeah.
And I had a moment on the couch, and, I thank God for my wife and her story and everything she had to go through in her life, because she looks at me and she's like, something's not right. And I'm like, finally, I just had that vulnerability moment. I internalized a lot of things up until this point in my life. And this is finally where I can be a little bit, I want to say, more vulnerable, more free. I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to learn, because I just put it all inside. Okay. And I stopped, doing the things that were, I guess, keeping me healthy, keeping me regulated. And it just came imploding inside. And my mind just disassociated from the whole event. I'm like, did this happen? I can't believe it. Right. And, some more destructive behaviors came as a result. So as a message, I guess I would say to anybody who is going through something now, or might, if it comes up in the future, is it'll happen. Yeah. I beat myself up for it quite a bit already, and nobody's going to beat me up harder than yourself. But it definitely could have gone a lot worse. If I didn't have resources like this, family, and again, just the vulnerability to say I need help, right, was the biggest thing. That learning to say I need help, and to the right people, and is been a huge learning curve, actually.
Knowing now, if you would have known that then, would you have asked for help earlier?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely.
So many times it takes till that point where we're at, call it a moment of rock bottom or whatever, where before we actually ask for help. But the smart man understands that ascent is happening and asks for help at that point. Is that,
if you can, yeah. If you can consciously, I don't know if I would have asked for help as we were going through things in Vancouver, but as coming home and sitting at home, being at home, and knowing that she's okay and she's in the clear, that's when I should have got back onto and being like, okay, what did I just go through? I had one friend that said, he's like, have you dealt with it? I'm like, yeah, man, I'm good. Yeah, we did this. Going home that night, I was like, did I? Have I dealt with this? Like,
good for you for thinking of that.
Yeah, if you can, right? And sometimes we're not taught, again, especially I think as men, we're said to, if I have a hole in the chainmail, then I'm weak, right? Then I'm susceptible to crumble and fall.
Right.
And like I said earlier, as a dad, you don't want that.
Right.
You know, as a provider for my family, I can't afford that. Mm-hmm. So then, like I said, you hold on, you internalize, but then it just leads you into a more kind of destructive path than you would like. So yes, if you can consciously think as things are coming down, this isn't what I'm used to. This is normally where I'm like, depression sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
Depression just comes out of, and we don't know the signs. There's a great interview I listened with Simon Sinek, and he has a friend in the military who's gone through PTSD and all these sorts. And he said, what are the signs? Mm-hmm. So I would say to anybody, it's good to know these signs, whether it's for you or for somebody else,
right.
Hey, you lose you have this, what is it? Lack of sleep is a big thing, but it's like you don't want to sleep. It's like I was going to bed at 3 a.m. every time. I said it was because I wanted to learn, and I was trying to keep my mind occupied with entrepreneurial things.
Yeah.
But then I'd wake up late in the day, and it's because I just that was the natural. And it took me a long time to crawl out of that hole. Right, that was the biggest thing. And then same thing, I didn't want to be around anybody. Shortness of like patience and my attitude and how things were, right? So there's all these little signs, like same thing, hindsight, I look back and go, man, this is what I was doing.
And maybe others around you might even notice it more than you.
100%.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I thank God for my family, for the closest friends that I have, and for my wife to say, hey, you know what, like this, we care about you. Nobody really pinpointed and said, you're doing this 100%. Like it was,
right.
Everything was done with love and graciousness. And
right.
I appreciate that. Maybe sometimes you need that.
It didn't take an intervention.
No.
For some it might.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I'm saying. If it does, then you don't have to beat yourself up about it. If you do hit that rock bottom, sometimes, it's always darkest before the dawn, right? Yeah. So you have to kind of sometimes find that. And I think I did. I think for myself, if I didn't make the turnaround in which I did to say, okay, I need help, I need to seek out professional help, then I need to take care of my health, and then I need to stop doing these habits, it could have gone a lot worse.
Okay. I'm really grateful that you were able to kind of open up and talk about this. While we were down there and this was all happening, this process was happening and all of that, the one thing that strikes me too, though, is the bravest of all of us was Alara.
Oh yeah.
Like
100%.
She was a hero. Like there's one point where she was attached to the chemo and she wanted to go for a walk around the hospital. Yeah. I think it was round 3 or something, because round 4 was a little hinky because that's when COVID had kind of started. And that was crazy. And I'm grateful that for the timing that we had, because that was, we got out of there just as it really started blowing up. But how strong the kids are. And I think about sometimes as adults that, you talk about how, we have this intrinsic need to provide, and I can't crumble because then I won't be able to provide anymore. When the answer is actually, you can keep providing and work on the thing that you're worried about crumbling. That's not a problem. You can do that. And I think Alara is the best example to all of us to go, like, she wasn't limited. Mm-hmm. She just was like, okay, now this is happening. Okay, this kind of sucks. I don't feel very good, but I want to go play over there. Like she just, and she was the bravest of all of us.
Oh yeah, and we drew strength from that as well, right? We shared the downtimes, the valleys, and as the peaks came up, again, we took full advantage. And it was like when she's smiling and she's happy, okay, we're okay, and then you get ready for the next. And carry on. So as a lesson, 100%, that was there. So
how do you feel, because now she's got, in some ways, she's got the best healthcare of any of us in our entire family, because they're going to follow her. She's got a team of people that are going to follow her until she's 20 years old, and they're going to, no matter what. And I mean, she's in the clear now. She's great now. does any of that fear show up, thinking back as we kind of circle in for a close here? Does, are you afraid now, or are you like, where are you feeling right now when you see Alara and you got to go to the doctor?
I mean, that protective instinct will never go away. I'm told as a parent, it doesn't matter how old your kids are, you're always going to want to be, mama bear, papa bear, however it is, right? And even when we do go back for testing, hey, PTSD is a real thing. I didn't know it. I didn't think I was susceptible to it. Last time we went to Vancouver in October, same thing. I didn't sleep a wink right beforehand. It's again weird what the mind wants to do that you sometimes don't have any control over.
Right.
So consciously, no, I'm not really afraid. I wouldn't say it's a fear, because I see her every day. I see how well she's doing. The tests that we're coming up on a year. In April will be 1 year. So we're going to go back to Children's Hospital. We're going to do, one last round of scans. And then afterwards we can start spacing out the testing based on those results. But everything leading up to it hasn't given us any cause for concern, right? So on a month-to-month basis, that's a huge stress relief. That's the weight off our shoulders. But yeah, there will always be that part where I just, we went through what we went through. I want to protect you and love you. If something happens, we know what we can do to take care of it, right?
Wow. As we close her up again, I want to just talk about how grateful I am for you for opening up and talking about this. Thank you for that. It is Child Cancer Awareness Day. That's what we're going to try and shoot to get this out for that day. I think that one of the lessons that we have learned is that we're not alone.
100%.
And for you, I remember you even telling me that was hard for you to let go of, is the idea that there are people who care. And to give them some of the RAM that's going through your head. Use some of their RAM a little bit. Mm-hmm. And we're not alone. Mm-hmm. And for anybody that's going through something like this, reach out for the people who, you're not alone either, and reach out. Yeah. It's been cool. It's been a terrible reason to watch you acquire that skill. Yeah. I mean, but you have it now, and this is you getting really vulnerable, and I just really am grateful for it. Do you have any parting words for anybody out there who might be hearing this message, here being touched by what you've been through?
I think you said it best so far, is that just saying that there are people there. It's a weird feeling. I think, again, as men, we learn to, that Spartan warrior type of feeling. Yeah. I've got this, right? But even they had a group of supporters with them. So we tend to forget that. Know that there's people there. Open it up and let that happen. As weird as it was for me to have a community of people saying, hey, we care. Hey, what can we do to help? Yeah. I was like, oh, I'm not a guy to ask for help, right? This isn't what I do. But once I let that happen, it made everything in life that much better. And then it taught me to do the same thing for other people. And just, if you're in a good space at this moment, you may not always be that way, but if you are, then reach out to those people and say, hey, I'm just thinking about you. Is there anything I can do for you? I'm here, that kind of deal, right? So
that's awesome. I'm sure this isn't going to be the last time that we talk to you on heCast here, and I'm sure as the app starts to expand and do some things, we're going to have some things that go in there. But for this this moment now, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time and taking your heart and basically opening up to all of us. Thank you, Nico. I love you very much, and I'm very grateful for you, and I'm very proud of you.
Oh, thanks, buddy. I love you too, man. Thank you.
There it is right there. So February 15th is Childhood Cancer Awareness Day. I wasn't sure about awareness days like this and their purpose before our family went through what it went through. But at the end of the day, February 15th is a day that I'm going to, number one, I'm going to be grateful because of our personal story. Number two, I'm going to think about people that are going through stuff. And maybe, you as a listener right now have somebody in your life that's going through some stuff. And, maybe you can direct them to this message, and or maybe you yourself might reach out to them and see what they're going through. I don't know. But these awareness days, they are important. And I didn't used to know that, but I know it now, and I'm grateful for that. Grateful for all of you. Thank you very much for helping to bring He Changed It to where we are now and where we're going. Holy smokes. Please feel free to subscribe, share, and we will see you next time on another episode of heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.